Right guys, hello. Discussion hat firmly on head, which means it's time for a discussion video. So, I have been trying to do a discussion video based on my thoughts about a random thought that's come up whilst reading a book. And recently, as you may know, I read Proxima by Stephen Baxter. And the one thought I had about this book was that it was incredibly frustrating for different reasons. And it was actually quite hard for a while for me to actually pinpoint whether I thought it was a decent book or not. And that got me to thinking, what is it I actually look for in a book? And I thought that might be an interesting thing to discuss, considering all of us are here talking about books and what we like about them. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the things that I look for in a book and how I judge a quality book versus one that's not maybe so good. I've even done it in a numbered list for you because it's the laziest and easiest video format I could do. And I am, in fact, a complete and utter hack. So, the first thing I look for when I'm reading a book is strong characters. That is characters with massive biceps that can lift up a skyscraper, that don't need any help from anyone, and can definitely stab all of their friends in the face and be snarky whilst doing it. No, that's not what a strong character is. Not at all. That is a warped, weird definition that you have to be somehow combat proficient or self-reliant in order to be a strong character. That's not, at least from my perspective, that is not what a strong character is. A strong character is one that is well defined, has a strong voice and personality that comes through in the text. An example of weak characters mostly can be found in something like Proxima, where you've got an antagonist character who shows up in a scene, he's given a name, and then he sort of has one mode, and he's like, I hate you, and you're my arsehole, and I hate you, and there's no reason behind it, there's no nuance, there's nothing to define him from the next guy who comes along and is like, I hate you, I bloody hate you. There's nothing like separating them out, and that's an example of a weak character. And I think this goes into just a side tangent with when people are talking about strong female characters. It's become this thing where they just want female characters to do like badass stuff, which is why people say Katniss is a strong female character because she uses a bow to shoot things with. But really, I think the reason that people were crying out for strong female characters, and I might be wrong, but the reason I think that they were crying out for strong female characters is that for a long time, female characters were weakly written characters. They weren't developed, they weren't fleshed out, they didn't have a strong background or motivation, they were just the girl. Like, if you look at any ensemble piece, like, you'll find like the male characters will be the nerd, the jock, the bully, the outcast, the rebel, whatever, and then you've got the girl, and her character trait is that she's the girl, and there's nothing else, and that's a weak character. So I'm looking for strong characters. I prefer personally characters that have a strong motivation for getting involved in the plot. That's something that's, I think, key to me, because it makes it really changes what the direction of the story, what that character's motivation is, and if that motivation is carried through in the story being told. That makes them a stronger character, and that's what I'm looking for in my characters in my books. Number 2 is an interesting idea, in brackets, something unique. Now, there's a old saying, Shakespeare has said it, I think it's like, there's no new stories or something. You know, it's an old thing, like everything that can exist has been done before. That's, you know, true in a sense, but what I'm looking for when I'm reading a book is something that takes an idea and presents it in a new way, or comes up with a brand new idea. Talking about Proxima again, this is one of the areas that I thought the book was really strong in, and I gave it credit for that. The book itself, whilst weak in pretty much all other areas, definitely had a lot of interesting ideas, had a unique setting, had a lot of good stuff going on, and that's something I was drawn to. It's the reason mostly why I pick up a book, is if I read the back and it sounds like it's going to be something quite unique, You know, that's cool. If you've got, like, for example, in mystery stories, like, definitely thrillers do this pretty well. A lot of the time, there's always a murder. Let's use the example, like, one that probably most people will know is like the Robert Langdon series. So you've got the Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons and Inferno and all that. Those stories are kind of the same each time, but what they do differently each time is they present a new sort of thing to learn about, almost like it's a different like secret society, or it's a different conspiracy, and those things are really cool. They set the books apart from each other, and it doesn't just feel like you're reading the same old plot points that you've read over and over again. So that's good. Like, that's what I'm really looking for, is just like one little nugget. It could be anything, like, but one little nugget that sets it apart from everything else. Like, for example, you could have the most generic story in the world, but if you've got one character that stands out from the pack and gives me something to think about and latch on to, I'm going to like it, and I'm going to give you credit for that. So that's what I want, is I want a little bit of ingenuity, not just treading out the same tired tropes. That's a reason why I don't like John Green books. All of them are pretty much exactly the same in terms of their theme and their characters. Pretty much exactly the same. And that's why I don't think they're that good. Like, one of them you might go, oh, that was cool, but then it does it again. Not interested. So, yeah, an interesting or unique idea. That's all I'm asking for. Can't be that difficult, can it? Number 3, an engaging writing style. Now, this one's hard to pin down, because what's engaging for one person isn't going to be engaging for everyone else. But the reason that I use the word engaging rather than good writing, I think that's something that people say on BookTube a lot, that I really like the writing in this, the writing was really good, without really qualifying what that means. And it's hard to qualify, so I understand why. A lot of times people say it's a beautiful writing style. What I think you need is the appropriate writing style for the information you're putting across. If you've got, like, a character who is supposed to be, like, really technical and logical or whatever, they might be presenting their dialogue in more straightforward sentences. If you've got a character who is more emotional, that you might have them doing things like a bit off the rails, and that's, like, you need to engage the reader with your writing style. I think nobody is sitting there reading a book really analysing every, like, point, like, mark you make on the page. Like, I don't think anyone's ever looked at a book and gone, that's a fucking sexy use of a comma. No one's ever said that. Like, no one's ever praised the sentence structure. It's more about the cadence and the, I don't know, it's like I say, it's so hard to explain, but, like, it's just about the way that the writing engages you. It's the writer's voice, is a term that writers use a lot. It's that voice. You can tell, but from book to book, when the same author has written it, because they've got a very similar style, and that is ultimately like a good or a bad thing. Like, for example, in Proxima, Stephen Baxter's style is quite clear. He wants to give you detailed exposition and technical details, but that's not particularly engaging in a story about survival on a mysterious planet, you know? Like, if I was reading a science textbook, that's probably great, that's probably what I'm after, but that's not what I was reading. I was reading a story, so it's got to engage me, it's got to make me interested. How difficult is that? Apparently very. Number 4, the pacing. Now, this is one that I personally get on my high horse about all the fucking time, and it's another one that's pretty hard to explain because it's so intangible. Like, when you're reading a book and you feel like, oh my god, this is taking so long, that's a pacing issue. When you're reading a bit in a book and you think, well, that felt like it was rushed through really quickly, that's a pacing issue. And the pacing of a book is going to be decided by what sort of emotion it's trying to drag out of you and what it's trying to achieve. If a scene is trying to develop characters in a sort of more slow, downtimey kind of way, you want a slower pace, and you want time to digest things. But when it's getting into action, you want a faster pace and you want things to be dragged through. Some books, I think, find a pace quite early on and they stick to it. Like as earlier I mentioned, the Da Vinci Code is very fast paced, like lots of chopping between chapters, different perspectives. That book moves very quickly, and I think it's fine for that because there's not a whole lot to get your head around. But in something like Slaughterhouse 5, for example, by Kurt Vonnegut, there's quite a lot to think about in there, and you don't want it to move that fast. And I think that book is pretty well paced. I think it's quite short, but it's well paced. So that's my thoughts on pacing. Did I rush through it? I don't know. I'm rubbish at pacing. Number 5, probably the one that a lot of people think is the most important, but I rank down quite low, to be honest, and that is a solid plot. Okay, what do I mean by a solid plot? I don't just mean, that it all makes sense from plot point to plot point, although that is probably a good idea to include in your book. What I mean is, I want things to all have a purpose and a reason to be there in the story. I don't want all these loosey-goosey loose ends. Proxima did this. Is probably something I didn't actually mention this in the review, and in hindsight I should have, because it fucking pissed me off. But they introduced plot points really early on that get dropped almost immediately, and then come back later on, like we're supposed to care or remember, when they're not carried through. I was glad that it wasn't just left dangling, but would have been nice. American Gods did that as well, actually. They introduced a plot halfway through that was then dropped and then brought back for no reason at the end. So yeah, like, plotting is very difficult when you want to include a lot of subplots, because you need to make them have a reason to be there, and they need to be, first of all, you need to keep track of them all. So you don't just leave them unanswered at the end. And secondly, like, it's good to carry them all the way through the story, so we know what we're meant to be caring about. We don't lose track of them in our heads. Sometimes books are really long, and sometimes if you don't plot your novel properly and you add in loads of different subplots, it can feel like padding if they're not relevant to the main story. And so tight plotting is something I looked for. Solid plotting, meaning like no fat useless plots, no like left dangling open plot threads. Like, if you're doing a first novel, Proxima, in a series, don't make it on a cliffhanger that doesn't resolve any of the character issues, because then it's just fucking waste your whole time reading the book. You have to read the next one even if you don't want to. Fucking stupid. It's stupid. Right, guys, that concludes my discussion on what I think makes for a good book. You may have noticed that there were 5 points in there. Strong characters, interesting ideas, engaging writing styles, pacing, and a plot. 5 points for 5 stars. And that's how I review my books, guys. Secrets out. If I think a book's done really well in any particular area, I give it a star for that area. So if it gets all of it right, it gets 5 stars. If it gets none of it right, it gets no stars. Proxima got 2 stars because it had really interesting ideas and it was actually paced pretty well. It wasn't rushed. It was all right. So it got 2 stars for that. It's more objective for me if I do it that way, because I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm looking for. That's what makes me the best book reviewer on BookTube, and I'll fight you if you don't agree with me on that. Joking aside, thank you for watching. Please comment below to tell me what you look for in a good book and how you prefer to rate your books. And yeah, like this video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already, because I'm doing new content all the time. Hot content coming out of the gate. And I'll see you next time.